Thank you, Shubho, and thank you all of you here for being present. Uh, the title of the talk is Lights, Camera, Action. So it says something about the background of where I come from and where our team comes from. It's an attempt to marry filmmaking and communication with social issues, and in particular with climate change and environmental issues. So without much ado, let me plunge into a little bit of background before we get into the issue of water itself. So this might intrigue a lot of you. This is a blower, which is used to clean a camera lens. And the reason why I'm beginning with this visual of the blower is because it connects back to many engineering friends of mine with whom I did school in the 70s. And the story goes as follows, that my maternal uncle, my mama, he had a patient who created a simple remote control device which enabled a television to be switched on or off by the frequency emitted by this blower. And believe it or not, but in the year 1978, nobody in my class could believe that you can actually switch a television on or off using sound. And I actually laid a bet with 3 friends who all ended up in the Bay Area after passing through the best engineering colleges in the United States, who refused to believe it. And I had 3 movies and 3 ice creams as a result of this bet. India has changed a lot since then. And we now have a country which has got 1 billion cell phone connections. And over half these connections are now with smartphones. So we might easily be led into believing that here is a country that changes rapidly, that quickly adapts new things. We've gone from an era where having a landline was a privilege to an era where people have 2 cell connections, 3 cell connections, right? But do we really change that fast? So let's have a look at this visual. This is a visual of a matrimonial column in a newspaper. And the interesting thing about this matrimonial column is that it is organized on the basis of caste. So those who are Indians, this is self-explanatory. Those who are not South Asians, perhaps a little bit of explanation would be in order, that almost all of us, without, with very, very, very marginal exceptions, get married within the jati and outside the gotra. Now you might say that this is a curiosity which is, restricted to the area of marriage. Marriage is, after all, a very sensitive issue. So to be traditional in this regard is okay so long as you change in other respects. So how well do we change, and in what aspects of life do we really change? So here is the price which somebody who breaks the rules. So people who married outside the gotra, on the left you can see the visual of the story of Manoj and Babli, both of whom were killed, not just killed, but killed in an extremely brutal fashion, merely because they belong to the same village. And if you belong to the same village, it is presumed that every boy and girl within the village are brother and sister, and breaking of this traditional rule invites death, and in this case her family members, and I can say this with safely because there's been a conviction. So these are not just rules which are made up, it's nice if you follow them, but these are rules which are enforced. So what happens is that what we are seeing here is that we change in some respects. We are quick to adopt a cell phone, but perhaps not so quick to adopt other things. Let's see some other things. Whether in respect of dowry, India is a country where even today, dowry is demanded when a girl gets married. Over half of Indian women experience domestic violence, and disparities in education and gender justice are so numerous that it is difficult to even count. At the bottom right, you can see that female feticide, which is basically what you do is you do a sex determination test, and on determining that the sex is female, the practice of aborting a female fetus is so rampant that some estimates say that as many as 30 million girl children are missing in this country. And this was in fact the very first episode we did of our show, Satyamev Jayate. So what are we discovering through this? The purpose is not to say that, things are hopeless or bad, not at all. The purpose is to say that in terms of what can we deduce, what can we infer about our behavior, is that there are two spheres of activity. One is a private sphere and the other is the public sphere. And for some reason, we are very quick to accept change in the private sphere. So when it comes to adopting the best technology in respect of a laptop or in terms of a car or in terms of a mobile phone or something else, we are quick and early adapters. We are very good with it. But when it comes to something in a public sphere, whether it involves healthcare, whether it involves traffic rules, whether it involves public education, there seems to be some problem over there. We are not very good in doing things which involve cooperation and coordinated action with large numbers of people. So in other words, what we are seeing here is that our behavior is resulted in what we call a social logjam. So essentially, there are two kinds of selfishness. One is a narrow selfishness where you are only thinking of yourself. But as we often find in social matters, and here the traffic indicates that if each person tries to get ahead, what happens is that collectively nobody gets ahead. So for me, this traffic jam is a metaphor of many problems that we face in India. So the purpose in showing this visual was not to talk about traffic, but was really to talk about the fact that whether we are talking about the water, whether we are talking about air, whether we are talking about environmental issues, whether we are talking about female feticide, in all these issues, we have created what we would call a social logjam. And a little bit this kind of selfishness is very illustrated by the story which a lot of you might be familiar with, but for those who are not, let me tell you the story of Akbar and Birbal. That once Akbar and Birbal had an argument about the people in the capital. And Akbar believed that, the people are absolutely the best people and they really love him and they follow his every wish. And Birbal said, let's find out. So every person in the kingdom was asked to bring a matka of milk and pour it into a tank. And the whole kingdom lined up and matka after matka was poured into the tank. And finally Akbar and Birbal went to the tank and opened it. And sure enough, it was only water. So Akbar said, what happened? So when people were asked about it, they said, no, I thought my neighbor will pour the milk, so I poured water. So this is a little bit of what is happening for us, that everybody wants to have girls, we want women, but we believe that it is somebody else's job and duty to have the girl, we'll have the boys. It is somebody else's job to follow the traffic rules, I'll cut the signal. Now this has resulted, this narrow self-interest has actually resulted in a situation where nobody's individual self-interest is being served. And we have created a social logjam which is affecting us in many, many spheres of life. The purpose in going through this is really to set up the background to our show. So we made a show about, many, many social problems that we face. Totally we did a show about 24 social problems. It was called Satyamev Jayate. And for those who are not familiar, the gentleman on the left is an Indian superstar called Aamir Khan. He anchored the show. He was also the producer of the show and one of the key collaborators with Swati and me in creating the show. And the show was intended to be a mirror to society. The idea was that this logjam that we are stuck in, we believe that this jam can be released. This jam can be solved. We have all the resources and the means and the ability and the understanding to get out of this situation. So we made this on 24 different social issues, and in each of the issues with great love, because we truly and deeply love our country and its people. And if anything I have said over here is based entirely on that love, because part of loving someone is being honest, is part of seeing your face in the mirror honestly. And so we try to sketch out what is the problem. The second is, why does the problem exist? And the third, what is the way forward? And for 24 issues and over 2 years, we made the show. What is the impact of the show? I'm going to give you only 2 examples. The example on the left, on my left, refers to what happened vis-a-vis the issue of female feticide in the state of Rajasthan. Now, why am I focusing on the state of Rajasthan? Not because Rajasthan is an exceptional state, but because as it happened, in the episode which we made for television, we had focused on the efforts of two journalists who had conducted a series of sting operations with doctors which concerned female feticide. So for those who don't understand what a decoy is, how a sting operation is conducted, essentially what happens is a pregnant woman goes to a doctor, asks for a sonography to be conducted, and asks for the sex or the gender of the fetus to be revealed. Now, this is explicitly forbidden by law in India. You are not allowed under Indian law. It is a serious offense to either ask for a sonography which will reveal the sex of the fetus, and it is certainly an extremely serious offense for the doctor to reveal that to the patient. So in 125 different instances, 125 doctors, without any prompting, without any cajoling, without any coaxing, readily volunteered that the sex was a female, and they offered to conduct the abortion. And they said the abortion can be done for rates as ridiculous as 2,000 rupees, 4,000 rupees. Koi nahi, theli mein dal do, yamuna mein fek do fetus ko. In this kind of language and with this casualness, which we all saw on camera during our show. What happened to the doctors? Actually, nothing happened. Nominally, cases got registered, but really the harassment of the journalists commenced. And over a period of 10 years, because the sting operations were conducted in the early 2000s, over 7-8 years, these journalists lost their jobs. They were in all kinds of trouble. On our show, we did a kind of crowdsourced mobilization of opinion. And this was the pre-WhatsApp era. So we asked viewers to send SMS, short messages, which would say that, yes, we want the cases against the doctors to be tried in a time-bound period for a fast tracking of these cases. And we received 7.5 million SMSs asking for this to be done. So armed with 7.5 million digital signatures, our team met the authorities in the state of Rajasthan, the Chief Minister, who in turn referred the matter to the Chief Justice of the Rajasthan High Court, and asked for these cases to be fast-tracked. And unbelievably, within a few weeks, a series of orders was passed at the judicial level and the administrative level, and the net result of it is that a movement was unleashed in the state of Rajasthan, where across two governments belonging to different political parties, the sex ratio at birth in the state of Rajasthan went from 888 in the year 2011 to 950, which is more or less the natural birth rate of girls to boys. So several 100,000 girl children were saved as a result of something as trivial, I might say, as a television show. On the right is the visual about what happened due to, thank you. We made a show about alcoholism, and where we said that often in society we castigate the alcoholic as a person of loose character. But alcoholism is a disease and has to be looked at with empathy and compassion. And there are ways of treating it with empathy and compassion, and Alcoholics Anonymous does this without charging any fee. And within a few weeks of the telecast of our show, 350,000 alcoholics registered to get into rehab, and that became the largest program for the rehabilitation of alcoholics anywhere in the world. I mean, to put the number in perspective, in 70 years, AA in India had something like 35,000 members, and in 4 weeks thereafter, you can see the numbers speak for themselves. This is not to say that what we did was something great. On the contrary, what it told us is that we as communicators, as filmmakers, as directors of film and television, had actually been failing in our duty for the last several decades. Because what it was telling us is that here is an opportunity to solve this logjam using communication. That the power of television, of mass media, can help in opening conversations that can make dramatic changes in life. And that started making us greedy. We felt that if we can achieve so much with just a show, perhaps we can achieve much more if we kill the show. Because there's a problem with the show format. And the biggest problem with the show format is that every episode acts as the enemy of the previous one. So we did an episode on female feticide and we had tens of millions of people talking about female feticide. And the next episode which we did was on child sexual abuse, which is a topic nobody in India talks about, or at least then didn't talk about. And we received 20 million separate pieces of communication just on child sexual abuse, including communication from people who were in their 60s, in their 70s, in their 80s, who recounted the horror and trauma of having been molested as children. But unfortunately, the week after that, we moved on and we went on to something else and something else and something else. So we figured out that if we want to really use and leverage the power of communication, what we need to do is to shut down the show and work on only one issue. And that's what led us to look at the crisis of drought. Now, if you look at drought in India has been an age-old issue. And the state that we hail from, the state of Maharashtra, 2/3 of Maharashtra villages are drought prone, and that has led to mass suffering, poverty, migration and suicides. And we did an episode in Satyamev Jayate about drought and the problems surrounding it. And we learned many, many facts about it. The first fact that we discovered is that surface irrigation services just around 23% of the land, agricultural land. And the remaining portion is all essentially using groundwater. So we are a groundwater society, we are a groundwater economy. What else did we discover? We discovered that there is a solution, and that solution is called decentralized watershed management. Decentralized watershed management essentially goes to the question that if we are using groundwater, then we are extracting water from the ground using pumps, right? So if you just extract water, then you also need to recharge the water table continuously. Otherwise, it's like a phone battery. If you keep using your phone and you discharge the phone, then obviously after some time, the phone is going to go dead. So what has happened in Maharashtra is that we have continuously been extracting water from greater and greater depths, first 100, then 200, then 500, now over 1,000 feet down, without recharging the water table. And as a result of it, the water table has gone down, 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 and increasing areas are now prone to devastating drought. So what is the technology? The technology of recharge is based on a single sentence. We have to teach running water to walk, we have to teach walking water to stand, and we have to teach standing water to percolate. Since obviously there are many engineers in this room, essentially in engineering terms, what are we doing is we are reducing the time signature of water. We are slowing it down in order to give it an opportunity to percolate and recharge the water table. Has this been done? Again, we've been pioneers in this in Maharashtra, and there are two villages which some of you all may have perhaps heard of, Hivre Bazar and Ralegan Siddhi, with great heroes in each of these villages, Popatrao Pawar and Anna Hazare. And these villages have over the last 3 to 4 decades shown that even in the most drought-prone regions, even in regions which fall within what we call the rain shadow, where you get hardly 300 millimeters of rainfall, you can have more than enough water for drinking water purposes, for agriculture, for animal husbandry, and you can be prosperous if only you just follow this simple technology. But strangely enough, although 2 villages have demonstrated that this can be done, this has not got scaled up. For the last several decades, anybody who's followed what's happening in Maharashtra with water will wonder, why is it that only 2 villages are doing it? Why is this not gone from 2 to 2,000 to 20,000? Why is it that in a country in which the mobile phone can quickly reach 1 billion, what is preventing watershed management from going to every village? So we go back to where we started from, that in private spheres, we are very quick and early technology adopters. But in public spheres, we are very slow. And what is the reason for that? That anything which you want to do in the public sphere involves and requires compulsorily cooperation with large numbers of people. And that perhaps is something which we are not that good at. That is what leads to the social logjam. That is what leads to our traffic jams, literally and metaphorically. So what are the reasons we studied? Why is it that we are not able to scale up this solution when it is so simple, when it is so low cost? And we said there were three reasons. One is lack of awareness. There is no knowledge of it. Connected to that is that we don't have the technical knowledge. The villager is not trained in the science of it. And finally, and most important, is social fracture. You cannot possibly expect to solve your problems which require a community level cooperation if the community is fractured. So we often believe that water, in a way, as a common pool resource, is something which is held together in a vessel which is called the community. And when the community comes together, just as when you cup your hands, if your hands and your fingers are all together, the water stays, right? But when a society is fractured along lines of caste, of political parties, of religion, or whatever else, if these fingers move apart, they are not capable of holding water. And this is a critical area, we believe, in all environmental issues, whether it's of water, whether it's of the air, whether it connects climate change, everything. It requires the coordinated, cooperative action of millions of people coming together. So we asked ourselves, as communicators, as people from television and film, can we use communication to get people together? Can we find a way to overcome social fracture? Can we turn watershed management into a people's movement? So in other words, the critical thing about a people's movement is we are not doing anything for the people. We are only finding ways of bringing people together because people have the ability, they have the strength, they have the resources, they have the genius to be able to solve their problems if only we can find a way of kickstarting that process. So we wanted to turn this into a people's movement. And we said that, look, if it's a people's movement, then it is not the job of Paani Foundation or the government of Maharashtra or a corporate or an NGO to go into every village and do it, because the villager himself or herself is going to do it. So what is the way in which we went about this? So we said, we thought of many different models. Can we make more television shows? Can we make more programs? What can we do? And we realized that the critical element in bringing people together is that people will only come together if there is a sense of purpose and there is a sense of joy. You have to have fun in the equation. You have to have joy in the equation. You have to have heart in it. For Satyamev Jayate, our tagline used to be, Dil pe lagegi tabhi baat banegi. To translate into English is that only when a thing emotionally affects you, will you give effect to it. So we felt that here for water also, we need to do something likewise. We need to make it part of the emotional system of the villager, and then only are we going to be able to produce action. So we said, let us try and answer three critical questions. The first question is, what is to be done? So here the answer is decentralized watershed management, which we've already spoken about. Second question is, how is it to be done? Now this knowledge needed to be provided. So here is where we as communicators, as filmmakers, we put together an online and offline training system. So the online system essentially consists, we created the first online suite of films where anybody, anywhere in the world can go and learn how each structure of watershed management, how is it created, where is it to be done, what are the do's, what are the don'ts. But more importantly, we said that if we are to get people involved in this, we need a competition. And that competition would be called the Satyamev Jayate Water Cup. So we already had Satyamev Jayate as a well-known kind of presence or a brand created over 2 years. So here we created a competition around it. And the unit of participation in the competition is not the individual, is the village. Is the village through its local self-government body, which is known as the Gram Panchayat. So a Gram Panchayat has to decide to take part. And the Gram Panchayat, in order to decide to take part, has to hold a meeting of all adults in the village where they unanimously have to decide, yes, we want to take part. And they have to select or elect 5 people who will be sent for training and who will be trained in the science of watershed management. Now, the training was a very, very important part of what we brought to the table. As I said, we created the online suite of films, but more importantly, we created a training module, which is a standardized training module, which we conduct for anybody who wants to participate in the Water Cup. And the villagers have to be insisted that out of the 5 participants, at least 2 must be women. This was a very, very important part of the DNA and ethos of what we were doing. Because women are far more involved and concerned with crises regarding water than the men are. And without getting women involved in this process, we were never going to make headway. I'll come to what the social effects of this have been later on in the talk. But right now, let me confine myself to the idea that we try to answer the question what, we try to answer the question how, and we try to answer the question why. And we discovered that answering the why was perhaps the most important, difficult, and critical part of it. As I said, part of the why is joy. People just coming together, giving them such a sense of community. Because when community is broken down, I believe there is such a deep, deep hunger for community that creating the platform which brought people together, I think was gratification in and of itself. A lot of people whom we meet in the villages, they break down and they say that, look, we never imagined that our entire village would get together for anything. So when a village gets together, people get out of their houses, they meet with smiling faces, they shake hands with each other, they hug each other. That creates a lot of excitement. And one of the things which we did in the competition rules is we gave disproportionate weightage to work done through manual labor or Shramadan. This was a very, very key element in our entire mix. Now, in an era of mechanization, of artificial intelligence, why would you go back to pickaxe and shovel? Because pickaxe and shovel forces you to sweat together. And we discovered that when people sweat together, a lot of boundaries, which are emotional boundaries, boundaries created by politics, by pettiness, by history, by caste, by religion, these boundaries break down. And people discover a newfound affinity and love for each other. So there's a complex marking system for the Satyamev Jayate Water Cup because it's a prestigious competition to win. So the name of the village, the joy and pride in your village. So if you see, what we try to do is we try to create a platform for change, and I'm using the word platform very, very consciously. What are the key elements of the platform? The heart of the platform is to create social unity. We believe that if you can create social unity, you can solve any problem in the world. Whether it is of water, whether it is of the air, whether it is climate change, whether it is agriculture, whatever it is. The key thing is social unity. People coming together with joy, people coming together with happiness, people coming together with enthusiasm. If we can do that, man is an incredibly ingenious animal. He can do anything on the face of the earth. So this is the first thing that we did. The second part of the Paani platform is knowledge. Knowledge is very, very important. And if you have only enthusiasm without knowing how to do it, the science of it, we are in all kinds of trouble. So that's the second part of the platform. And the third part of the platform was motivation. So we created a whole ecosystem around it. So we had huge cash prizes for the competition. I'm proud to say that the Satyamev Jayate Water Cup is the single largest competition for rural India by a factor. So there is almost 100 million Indian rupees up at stake in prize money every year for the villages to participate in. In fact, a lot of people asked us, people are working for their own good, why do you have prize money? And I said, just think about it, that you have several times this amount being paid to players to play cricket in the Indian Premier Cricket League for a period of 6 weeks. If we truly believe that the environment matters, if we truly believe that water matters, then we need to put our money where our mouth is. And we need to create a sense of prestige around this. So why not have large cash prizes? So these are the three things in the platform. We started with a pilot edition back in the year 2016. Now it seems a lifetime back, but it was just 3.5 years ago that we started with the first Water Cup. And it was held in 3 tehsils or blocks in Maharashtra. 116 villages participated and huge amounts of work were done. We had 10,000 people getting out of their houses every day and doing Shramadan and creating all kinds of watershed management structures, and dozens of villages became drought-proof through that process. So encouraged by that, we scaled it up. Now here is the story of the scaling up. So we went from 3 talukas and 116 villages 3 years back to 76 talukas and 4,706 villages in the most drought-prone areas of Maharashtra. So the scale-up has been at least 25x, if not more. And now we've understood that if you stick to doing only what your platform mandates, then actually infinite scale-up is possible, because we've continuously been absorbing technological elements which have helped to scale up, which we'll speak of a little more later. What has been the impact on water? So here you can see the sheer statistical spread of what has happened. That in 3 years, without even including the data from this year's competition, 14,960 kilometers of one structure. So these are various structures in watershed management. Just to put it in perspective, India, which is a large country, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari runs 3,300 kilometers. So these structures, many of them are running several X Kashmir to Kanyakumari, which is the north-south distance of Maharashtra. That is the scale on which these structures have been created. And the beauty is that these structures have been created by people through their own effort. Because the cornerstone of our competition is we do not fund a single village to do this work. So the job of Paani Foundation is to train people and motivate them. But the actual execution, the actual planning, the actual fundraising, the actual bringing people together is all done at the local level within a village. And this is the kind of work which gets done just through community mobilization. What is the potential water storage created? It's 318 billion liters of water. And when the clip we play, you will see the kind of impact this has had. So hundreds of villages have succeeded through this process of drought-proofing themselves, of having abundant water, of having transformed their agriculture, of being people who migrated to becoming farmers who are earning millions of rupees also every year through agriculture. So dramatic impact this has had. But for us, the social impact has been far more important, because what is sustainable is ultimately not a structure. If things are to sustain, people must remain together. So long as people are together, it will sustain. If that we do not succeed in, we will not sustain. So we'll just give you a few examples of what has happened due to the competition. The first is a village called Krishnapur in Vidarbh, which I was personally present at, where 4 leaders of different political parties, they got together to participate in this entire movement and program. So we had the sitting MLA, the former MLA, the sitting Zilla Parishad chief, the former Zilla Parishad chief, who are absolutely at loggerheads with each other. But they said that for water, we will not have politics. So this for us was a giant step. When people decide that for issues of environment, we will put aside our differences. We will come together and we will work together. We will put our energies where our word is. That itself is a huge, huge, huge step forward, we believe. The second is gender barriers. We have seen thousands of women getting trained through this process. And these are women who are going out of who are going to a place which is a tiny village, because we conduct our training. Let me speak a little bit about our training. Our training is not conducted in a nice air-conditioned center. All our trainings are conducted in tiny villages which have themselves done the work of watershed management. So what happens is that if I am selected by my village as a trainee, I am taken suddenly to a tiny village and I wonder initially, why have I been brought here? This is a village just like mine. There's nothing special about this place. But then I start looking around. And when I look around, I discover that in the searing heat of February and March, there's water in the wells. There's agriculture going on. People are happy. They are prosperous. And then I start figuring out why is that happening, and I see that, they have created these structures. And these watershed management structures have resulted in this impact. And then I talk to my fellow villagers over there, and they tell me that if you do this, you can make your village also prosperous. Now what has happened is that because it has come from the villager, a villager who is located exactly like them, that has a real impact. Because if Satya says something, what does Satya know about a village? Satya doesn't live in a village. He doesn't know anything about it. What are his bona fides? But a villager like me, when she or he tells me about it, it has a dramatic impact on my understanding. The other thing that we do in our training is that we have tried to leverage all our skills as filmmakers to the training process. A lot of people look at training the way you look at prisons, that you have got somebody imprisoned in front of you and now you can do what you like until the training gets over. But coming from television, we are terrified constantly of losing the attention of the viewer. In fact, as a television director, I can tell you that the one device which scares us the most is a remote control, right? Because you can use the remote control to surf away and watch something else. So merely because you are in front of me is not enough. Your mind must be on what I'm saying. And for that, it's very important that the training should be an engaging, even an entertaining exercise. So we try to make the training as emotional as possible. I'm going to give you one example of the kind of games that or activities that we carry out at our training. So we play a game called the straw game. In the straw game, what happens is that the entire cohort of trainees is distributed into 4 teams. Each team has to elect one grandfather, one son, and one grandson. Initially, all 4 grandfathers are called to the tub of water. In front of the tub of water, there are straws and there are bottles. And they are told to pipette water using the straw and put it into the bottle. So the moment the whistle is blown, 4 grandfathers come forward and they start furiously pipetting that water and putting it into the bottle. And the others are cheering, "Grandfather, faster, Azoba, ani fast kara." And quickly the water in the tub gets over. Then we call the sons and we add some water to the mix. Now it's the chance of the sons to do the same process. And again, the water is exhausted. And then we call the grandsons. And this time around, we don't refill that tub. And when we don't refill that tub, they say, "How can we play the game? The game is over if you don't refill." And we say, that's exactly what we've done with Mother Earth. We have drawn up all this water and now it's game over. And actually, we don't even need to say it. We actually just stay silent and allow the participants to discover for themselves what they have done. So in an era where we have by and large become self-centered, we still are concerned about our children, our grandchildren. And when they realize that this is the earth we are leaving to our descendants, this is a crime we are committing on our own flesh and blood. A dry, dusty bowl with no water, no vegetation. It strikes such a deep emotional chord that there and then they vow that we are going to go back and we are going to transform our village. So the whole method that we have tried to use in our training is one of activities, of conversations, not of top-down, but of peer-to-peer, not of listening, but of participating. And in this, when you have so many women coming out of their houses as the representatives of their village, that in itself is revolutionary. Some of you all who are not familiar with Indian society might find it difficult to believe, but the women don't even sleep for those 4 days in which the training is taking place because they're so excited to be the representatives of their village. It is for the first time they are going to a place which is neither their Mecca nor their Sasural, which is neither their maternal home nor their husband's home. It's the first time that they're going. And that for them is so empowering, so liberating, such a fantastic experience that we have seen dozens and dozens of women transformed. And they go back as the champions of their village. And in the clip later, you will see a lady who is in her 60s and 70s leading the entire village. religious divides. We have seen divides of caste, of religion dissolve. When people work together, sweat together, come together and discover with joy, we can do it. We have seen people withdraw cases they filed against each other. We have seen people donate their lands for public good. All kinds of miracles getting unleashed, and the beauty of it is that all of it happens spontaneously from below. Not I nor any member of my team can claim any credit for it. There is just that huge amount of goodness within people which is just dying to get out. All that people needed was a platform and a trigger. And once the platform and the trigger was in place, it unleashed a process which we find truly miraculous and spectacular. So now I'm going to play you a film which will give you a little bit of a jhalak, a visual representation of the work that we do.
The wheels of time keep turning. Seasons change. The blistering heat of May and June creates a yearning for the rains. And then, every year, the monsoon arrives. Sometimes it is plentiful, sometimes scarce, but come it does every year. And so it did this year too.
त्या दिवशी पहिला पूर आला आणि शिशिट्या अशा टुम भरल्या, तळे टुम भरले. सकाळी 7 वाजता जाऊन पूर्ण लोक ते डोंगरा बघून असे उड्या मारत होते, तळेत नाचायला पवायला लागले, असे हे माझं पाणी म्हणून म्हणून.
मी जे शेततळ तयार केलं तर ते शेततळ भरलेलं बघून मला आनंद मायलने मी पहिल्यांदा उडी मारल्यावर बाकीची लेकरं उडी मारली.
अनुभव असा म्हणजे की पावसामध्ये पोरांनी लगेवर जाऊन शूटिंग केली, एवढं भारी दिसायला की वाटायला लागलं हे काम संपायला नाही पाहिजे, तर पूर्ण डोंगर शिवारच निघायला पाहिजे होता.
In thousands of Maharashtrian villages, this year it is as if a miracle occurred. This year, the rainwater did not leave villages. It made its home there. This has been achieved by a people's movement. The fruit of the sweat and toil of those who took on the mission of making their villages water abundant by taking part in the Satyamev Jayate Water Cup contest. Both government and prominent leaders of industry generously supported this people's initiative. The contest started in the year 2016 with just 3 talukas in Maharashtra. Expanded in 2017 to 30 talukas and grew 25 times this year, 2018, to reach 75 talukas across Maharashtra. More than 4,000 villages participated. Over a 2-month period, more than 20,000 villagers were trained in the science of watershed management. These villagers then returned to their villages to sow the seeds of a water revolution. The Water Cup was scheduled to begin on the 8th of April. But from the night of April 7th itself, lakhs of water warriors, fully armed to take on the drought, kept vigil for the battle to begin. At the stroke of midnight, their army launched a determined attack to vanquish drought. A wild dream to free oneself in just 45 days from the shackles of drought with one's own might. People joined hands, putting aside social divisions and old rivalries. With every passing day, the army of water warriors grew. In these 45 days, the rising and setting sun saw many a miracle unfold. Somewhere it was woman power, elsewhere the determination of youth, or even an army of children.
मी सर्व विद्यार्थ्यांना तयार केलं व आमची एक घट्ट तुफान सेना तयार करायची. माझी 150 मुलांची टीम आहे. बोला मी का एक साथ दुश्मनाची दोन.
Even seniors, uncaring of their aches and pains, worked obsessively towards a brighter future for coming generations.
आम्हाला सुद्धा एक तकलीफ होती, संध्याकाळी अंग दुखते, पैसा नसतो इंजेक्शनला, तर 2ला सुटल्यानंतर दुसऱ्याचा रोजगार करायचा, तिथून 4 रुपये आणायचे आणि मग इंजेक्शन करायचं. पण काम नाही सोडलं, जशी सुट्टी घेतलीच नाही.
By day, the sun was witness to people's madness. And when by night, the baton was handed over to the moon, it saw thousands doing Shramdan without a moment's rest. Those 45 days became a festival of labor, full of song, dance, and celebration. By the time the competition came to a close, this grand obsession had transformed the face of entire landscapes. Driven by this collective madness, villagers who had once struggled for a single tanker of water created with their own hands structures that could harvest more than 222 billion liters of water. If filled in tankers of 10,000 litre capacity, this quantity of water would fill more than 22 million tankers. And if these tankers were lined up, they would circumnavigate the earth more than 3 times. It is this human spirit, this determination, that has kept the rains captive in village after village this year. People are celebrating their newfound affinity with water. Nature and mankind are dancing with joy as they become one.
Thank you. So now to the challenges ahead. So what has happened now as a result of this over the last 4 Water Cups is that literally tens of thousands of men, women, children have got motivated and have got used to a critical idea. What is that idea? That I can solve my problem. I have the ability, I have the genius, I have the knowledge to solve my problem. And they are hungry to do more. And we will need to do more because we are living in an era of climate change. And that climate change has resulted in such devastating effects in the state of Maharashtra. You are in California. I don't need to tell you about climate change and drought. But in Maharashtra, it is unbelievably bad. There are entire regions each year where, there is no rain. 50 millimeters, desert kind of rainfall. So when we read about, there's good rain in India, what we don't realize is the regional imbalance. So you can have a portion getting a lot of rain and huge portions where there is no rain. And what we are finding now is that regional variations and variations in time have become terrible. So you either have, feast or famine kind of situation. So when it rains, there is excess rain. And when it doesn't rain, it's just terrible, which is the worst thing for agriculture, right? So this is one huge challenge. The other challenge is that what water is there, how do we use it judiciously? How do we handle the demand management of water? How do we ensure that water which comes within a village is not used for water-intensive agriculture like sugarcane? So this is the second. And final challenge is ecological restoration. Without ecological restoration, we are going to make no headway. We need to bring our forests back. We need to bring our grasslands back. We need to improve soil organic carbon. So these are 3 fundamental thrusts which are extremely difficult and knowledge intensive, which we need to work on. And here is where we believe that technology can play a critical role in this entire process, can especially play a role in compressing time frames to understand newer and better technological approaches. Because otherwise, in agriculture and in ecology, it being a living process, if we are going to rely only on standardized old methods of testing, it could take us very, very long time, and I don't believe we have a very long time. We are running out of time. The countdown to midnight, I don't know what it is. Is it 30 seconds, 15 seconds, 10 seconds? It's anybody's guess. And we believe that there are a lot of things that we can work on together. And one of the key things in being here was to build on the work started by Shubho here, who has been contributing in huge ways. And there are many, many tools that we've been collaborating on in developing, which we believe can play an important role in enabling and empowering this entire process. Shubho was in India in May during the competition this year and has seen firsthand how millions of people work together. Thank you very much, Shubho, for all the efforts that you've been making. And I'd like to invite every one of you, your colleagues. There are many things that we can do. It's very difficult to say this in a talk. This involves granular discussion. But we believe that technology is going to be critical if we are to make a serious dent in this issue. As I told you, the challenges are on multiple fronts. But I think it's extremely heartwarming to see, so many of you will come here today and listen to this talk. So I understand that I'm running out of time. So I'd like to thank you very much. Thank you, Google. Thank you, Shubho. Thank you all of you all for being here.